What's up, Pitt fans? Welcome back to another Pitt mailbag here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. He is Chris Carter. I'm Noah Hiles. And Chris, spring sports season winding down. We've got some questions about Pitt athletics in general, the transfer portal for basketball, which closes Thursday, and some football stuff. Everything that we're going to dive into right now. We'll start off with a question from Sean, who says, given the many successes of Heather Lyke in her era so far, what do you see as the top priority for her over the next 3 to 5 years? Chris, you want to start?
We could talk about other sports and kind of balancing everything out at Pitt, but I think a real big thing is an opportunity coming up for all college teams right now, and that's win a collegiate football playoff game. When the expansion happens in a couple of years and it grows to, I think it's going to be 12 teams, they're going to have the earlier rounds hosted by some of those teams. Noah, can you imagine the scene of Pitt football winning a college football playoff game at Acrisure Stadium in front of fans, what that could do for the program? Getting that kind of excitement, that open, like the idea that, hey, there's a path to a championship. There's an actual path. It's not you have to be close to undefeated and then still get lucky with some rankings at the end of the year. It's, hey, make this group of 12, which it still would take a lot for Pitt to do. But if they were able
to be a one-loss team, pretty much, for Pitt,
right? Basically, with the standing of the ACC. But if they could pull that off, I think that would boost their resume immensely, and being on the early swing of this new open door of how many playoff teams there's going to be, you could be one of the teams that takes advantage of that earlier than others and maybe win some more recruiting battles.
Yeah, and I think my answer to this question would heavily influence Pitt football's ability to make what you said happen, and it heavily influences the success factor in every sport on campus, and that's you've got to develop a better NIL collective. I think that's got to be the big focus here. You could point to individual athletic departments or programs in Oakland here. You could say, they just let go of the softball coach on Monday morning. They're looking to fill other positions currently, and they've already, hired a new gymnastics. Actually, no, they have hired a new gymnastics coach. They've hired a new women's basketball head coach. And there are a lot of programs winning. You could point to the spring sports, which aren't as competitive as we've seen winter and fall athletic programs be. But the bottom line is, as we continue to operate in this new world of college athletics, NIL is only going to become more important. And you point to football and basketball, two sports where Pitt is competitive in. I mean, the Panthers would have been in that 12-team playoff field 2 years ago had it existed. And the basketball team made the NCAA tournament this past year and won multiple games in that tournament. And if you want to continue to do that, you're going to need to have good NIL stuff, because you're able to get by with it now because it's so new. But in 3 to 5 years, if you don't make significant progress, other schools in the ACC, they are going to make significant progress. And we're seeing now in the transfer portal, just looking at some of these big names for basketball, guys like Jesse Edwards, Caleb Love, and players like that, Joe Girard. NIL plays a factor in the transfer portal. And you could say that doesn't have anything to do with the university or whatever the legislation is, but the bottom line is, if Pitt wants to start landing the Hunter Dickinsons, the Caleb Loves, the big-time guys, and same for football, if it wants to get the Dejon Reynolds, or who's the Dante Cephas, who had lost to Penn State, or other big-time guys who they're in the mix for, but they don't necessarily land, NIL is going to help push them over the finish line in some of those cases. So I think that NIL should be it's the number one thing. It should be the number one thing on every athletic director's plate right now in college sports, because it's a difference maker. And
I agree with you.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of the transfer portal, Mason wants to know, should Noah Thomasson commit to Pitt Wednesday? What role would you expect him to have? Is he a starter coming off the bench? Is he a point guard or a shooting guard? And that's an interesting question. I'll start with this one. Noah Thomasson, Niagara combo guard, graduate transferred, took his final official visit which was at Pitt this past weekend. He's announcing his commitment on Wednesday, May 10th. Pitt's in his final 5 school options. It's Penn State, Georgia, St. John's, and San Francisco are the other 4. And personally, I know that I've had multiple sources tell me this was Pitt's number one priority. this guy was ever since it landed Ishmael Leggett as its second guy in the portal. I don't know what his role would be. I think based off of roster construction right now and looking at Thomasson's game and what he's willing to provide, if he's cool with it, which is an ask, I think I would see him in a Nike Sabande type role, kind of like a veteran sixth man off the bench, because I think Pitt has a good, solid starting five with the players it already has, with Dior at the 1, Leggett at the 2, Hinson at the 3, Zach Austin at the 4, and Fetty at the 5. And while you have decent bench pieces right now with those young guards and the Diaz-Graham twins, and you could point to other people as well, Will Jeffress maybe, I just think that you need one established vet coming off the bench, especially in the backcourt. And, old guards win games in March. And I think that having him coming in at that first media break is a valuable thing. What about you, Carter? Do you have him as your sixth man if he commits, or do you think that he bumps Dior or Leggett for a starting spot at one of those top 2 guard spots?
It's tough for me to bump one of the bigger guys that they've brought in. So I agree the Nike Sabandi role would be really impressive for them. But you and I have talked about the importance of them finding a veteran guard for this roster, because that was something that they had as an asset to them last year when you have Jamarius Burton and Greg Elliott and Nike Sabande. You keep going down the list, and they had guys who not only were older, but just knew how to respond in different moments. And, not that younger guys don't, but they haven't been through some of the wars in the collegiate level. Noah Thomasson's going to have that with him. I also think it's important to note he shot 38.6% from 3-pointers, which is the same exact percentage that Greg Elliott shot when in his last year with Marquette before joining Pitt. And that's something that's going to be a real question. Who are going to be the shooters at Pitt next year? Who will be, will Blake Hinson be able to keep it up? And he's going to need help to kind of keep the floor spread out and get Pitt spacing in order. Noah Thomasson, at least on paper, looks like he's could be a guy that could fill that role for the Panthers and help bring that veteran presence, so that, we always talk about, it's great to get 4-star guys like Dior and like the guys they're bringing in. But what happens if Jalen Lowe doesn't work out? What happens if those guys, Pitt has had guys like Jerome Drumgoole come in, and he was a guy that was supposed to do a lot, and it didn't work out. They're still waiting for Will Jeffress to turn into a star. Those type of things happening. Having a veteran who's proved himself on a collegiate court will help, I think, balance if those slumps happen, or if you just don't get a hit from one of the recruits that you were expecting a lot out of this year.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing, regardless of what role you bring him in to play. And to round up this point, is Thomasson gives you a lot of lineup flexibility. It allows you to go small if you want, and you could go with Dior, Leggett, Thomasson, and then Hinson at the 4 and Austin at the 5. If you really want to run the floor and have shooters at every position, you could go with a veteran backcourt. You could do so much with him added on there. And regardless if he's a starter or not, I like the Nike comparison, because Nike, he was the ACC sixth man of the year. He played more minutes than at least one starter every game, it seemed like. He was always getting 20 plus. So he's going to have a big role regardless if he's in the starting lineup to begin or the first guy off the bench. He'll be an impact player if he comes to Pitt. Alan wants to know, we learned last week that Pitt will play the preseason NIT in New York. What is the significance of playing in events like these? And why does it seem like everyone Pitt plays in is located in New York City? Carter, you want to start with this one?
There's a reason for that. New York got ballers, man. And you that used to be a trove for Jamie Dixon to just go, and even Ben Howland too. The Big East tournament, Madison Square Garden. You put on a show. You're out there. So the kids in New York that are coming up, they're like, yo, that team's fun. I want to play for that team. It was an extra arm of recruitment that you didn't even have to work as hard for. So now that the ACC tournament is bouncing around from Greensboro to DC to wherever it's going to be next, you look at that. That's not an advantage that Pitt has had for quite some time now. So yeah, get back into the New York markets. Get in front of some of those recruits that you want to see. Help you show off what you're able to do as a program. And in previous tournaments like this early in the season, Pitt wasn't good. But if this year they can be good, it can help them, and maybe it helps them get a recruit from that area, which is a strong pool to pull from in the basketball world.
Yeah, Jeff talked about this with us before they went to the Barclays Center last year to play Michigan and VCU. He on top of everything what you just said, Chris, and that is the primary objective, is you want to be recognized in I think it's safe to say the basketball capital of the world.
Yeah.
People will argue it could be Tobacco Road, it could be Chicago, it could be Indiana, but I mean, I think New York is the biggest city in the country, I believe, and it's a huge basketball town. There's a lot of history there, and on top of like the recruiting advantages, Jeff Capel to his core is a basketball junkie. He's a hoops nerd, like
Absolutely.
me and Chris and a lot of other people who just love the sport. And he said he likes competing in that town. He likes getting his players the opportunity to play in Brooklyn or at Madison Square Garden or wherever they can in that city, because it's just different to play basketball in New York. And those opportunities to go toe to toe with programs like Michigan, who last year didn't have a great season, but that's one of the better college basketball programs in the country. And VCU was a tournament team last year. I mean, this year you look at the 4 teams headlining that. It's Pitt, it's Oregon State, it's Florida, and it's Baylor. I mean, Baylor's 2 years removed from a national title. So that's good quality competition early on in the year. And you saw, while the Panthers, they certainly took a beating against quality competition early in the season, you see what that can do for a team in this era where they can take their lumps early and learn from it. And I think he's looking to replicate that once again. I think I love it. I can't wait to cover it again. I love going to New York, and I'm already looking forward to it. Mike wants to know, was Pitt's signing of Jackson Brown, the freshman tackle from California, needed? It feels like there are bigger areas to address on the roster than the offensive line. So Pitt didn't sign this. I mean, they technically did. They got him in the transfer portal. But I get what Mike's asking here, because Pitt had 3 open scholarships to provide, and it uses one of them on a tackle. And when you think of Pitt's weaknesses for this current roster, offensive line doesn't necessarily jump off the page compared to other position groups, specifically wide receiver is what I'm sure he's alluding to. But if you look, they're pretty deep on that second line, or, as far as backups go internally. They've got a lot of good young centers and guards. After Ryan Baer, there is not a lot of tackle depth. So
Agreed.
I think getting a guy like Jackson Brown, whose dad played at Pitt, I mean, he has a year of college football under his belt, but still 4 years of eligibility because he redshirted at Cal last year, a Power 5 player. That's I think, a pretty significant landing. You're getting a guy who essentially is coming in and can be both a short and long-term solution should you see an injury at the tackle position, something we saw 2 of last year. So, yeah, I think you can never have enough depth on the offensive line. Carter, do you agree?
I do agree. And also, I mean, that's part of what I think helped Pitt in its best years. It's had really good offensive lines that could bully people. It was a big part of their ACC championship win. It was a big part of the team that got to the ACC championship the only time before that.
Yeah.
And I think it was a big part of what kept them alive last year, opening holes for Izzy Abanikanda and keeping Keaton Slovis alive for as long as they could. And I look at that and I see, like, man, there's advantages there to keep investing there. And this kid is a redshirt freshman, 6'6", over 300 pounds.
Yeah.
You're bringing him in. That's great size. And again, you don't need him right away. You got Matt Gonsalves. You've got Branson Taylor. You've got Ryan Baer. You've got guys who can answer the call right away. But like you said, the future would be in doubt. You got those guys that we were naming. Some of those guys, they're redshirt seniors now. Like Matt Gonsalves has been around forever. Branson Taylor's a redshirt junior. There's guys that they're just not going to have for that much longer. And while Pitt has been able to enjoy the benefits of the extra year that the COVID year provided, and that gave them extra depth in a lot of places, they have to still be aggressive to stay strong in the area. So yes, they're not going to get in a wide receiver that's going to boost a group that there's a lot of question marks about. But I think that this guy can come in. He's coming from the West Coast. In Jackson Brown, I think he's going to be able to come in, at least give you size, give you good looks in camp. And then if it doesn't work out, you try again with the transfer portal, or keep recruiting offensive line like you always do. But this guy's big, he's physical, he comes in and he at least gives you a chance to be a backup this year and maybe be a future part of your offensive line in the next couple of years.
And bottom line for me, I'd rather solidify depth at tackle than wide receiver, especially in Pitt's offense.
Yes.
It's just too important. Like we pointed out last year. I mean, going into last season, the offensive line all returned, but only one of those guys I think played the entire season, or two of them, excuse me. Cradle played half at guard, half at center, and Marcus Minor, but the other three guys, Owen Drexel, and Carter Warren, I mean, they all went down with injuries for part of or the remainder of the season. And you look at that depth that you had Gonsalves waiting and ready. You had Branson Taylor. You had Ryan Jacoby and all of these other guys ready to go. And that second wave needs to be rebuilt now because those are your starters. And Ryan Baer, everyone's excited about him. And Terrence Moore is a guy who you'll probably see on the rotation as well. But like I said, there's not a lot of depth at those tackle spots, and I'd rather see a freshman on a wide receiver rotation, especially in this offense that doesn't throw the ball a ton, than, a freshman in a tackle position. Right. You don't want to see Matt Gonsalves twist his ankle and some kid playing his first ever football game at Notre Dame or Florida State. You don't want that.
Right.
So that's to me why that was the priority. I also think it didn't take much to get him just because of his family history. I talked to the kid. He was pretty sold on Pitt immediately. So it wasn't as difficult as a sell as it might be to some receivers who I know they're still targeting with those two open scholarship spots. So we'll see. I still think Pitt will add some receiver depth, but they get the guys who A, they feel like they need, and B, who say yes first. So it's a little bit of both there. We move on now to our final question, which is from Aaron. With the transfer portal closing Thursday for basketball, which ACC basketball team do you feel has made the best upgrades through the portal? Carter, do you want to start this one, or shall I?
I'll take it. I'll take a shot at this.
Okay.
Let's go with a team that underperformed last year with all the expectations, and the first ever team
Boston
to be ranked
College. Sorry.
Well, totally. I mean, I guess they underperformed, but the team that was ranked number one for the first time ever preseason that didn't make the NCAA tournament, that's UNC. And UNC, it's important to note they did lose a lot of guys, but they're also gaining now advantages here. And there were rumors about the rifts between the locker room and things that were going. Puff Johnson's gone. Caleb Love's gone. A lot of those guys are gone. But guys who stuck around, you're keeping Armando Bacot, you're keeping RJ Davis, guys who were valuable assets that have been part of the success that they've had so far. And in coming in through the transfer portal, they're bringing in guys like Harrison Ingram, a former five-star kind of stretch four player. He averages about 12 points a game. You're bringing in a Cormac Ryan, an experienced guard out of Notre Dame. You're also being able to bring in a Jalen Withers and Paxton Wojcik. So they're filling out their roster right now and figuring out how things are going to work. But they needed star power. They needed veteran guys who could balance the top of the roster with the stars that are sticking around. So North Carolina, it's one of those rich gets richer kind of situation. I know they weren't rich last year because they missed the tournament.
I mean, they were rich. They just spent their money in a dumb way.
Exactly. They blew it. But the thing is that with a lot of programs, Noah, like if Pitt, had spent that kind of money and missed, they'd probably be paying for it for the next 5 to 8 years or however long it would take to rebuild. North Carolina took that swing, completely missed, and now they're just going to take another big swing, and that's why I'm intrigued to see how they play this year.
Yeah, I think that I agree that North Carolina, here's why I love their offseason. It's because I feel like they had one too many superstars on that team, where Bacot needs a lot of touches to become effective. And so does Caleb Love. Caleb Love is a guard that he needs the basketball a lot. He dribbles the air out of it. He needs to shoot a lot. And he's one of the top offensive backcourt presences in the country, in my opinion. I mean, he's incredible to watch in person or on television. But when you have someone like him and Armando Bacot and a really good point guard in RJ Davis, it's just kind of like it goes against that old notion, there's only one ball. And while there's some teams where they're able to make that work, I feel like the backcourt kind of got divided there last year in Chapel Hill, where there were those reports that there was a rift between Love and Davis, and with Davis sticking around, Love goes to Ann Arbor, and rather than going and getting another superstar like a Hunter Dickinson or somebody, they go and they get guys who can be more of like a Brady Manick type situation, like you mentioned with Ingram. I love the Withers addition as well. I mean, that he was a big time high school recruit. He goes to Louisville, where You know, I mean, no one really achieved anything in Louisville last year on the basketball court for men's, I will say. Women's program did great, but I think a fresh start will be good for him. And same for Cormac Ryan, where, you know, that Notre Dame program, I mean, their coach kind of announced that he was leaving like 2 weeks into the season or something. So they were kind of dead in the water as well. I think you're getting a whole bunch of dudes who aren't maybe sick of each other, and they might be able to build around those two stars in both areas of the floor and make things interesting. My pick, though, would be NC State, another Tobacco Road team. I love the guy they got in Jaden Taylor, a veteran guard, junior, Butler's leading scorer last year, and MJ Rice, a consensus 5-star from Kansas, who was a freshman last year, didn't play. I mean, can you blame him not getting a lot of minutes in Kansas's backcourt last year, right? Yeah. But I mean, this guy's going to be a tough player, and they have some big holes to fill, mainly being Tarquavion Smith, one of the top guards in the ACC over the past couple seasons. But I think that could be one of the more underrated backcourts in the ACC if all goes as planned. So that would be my pick. I also really like what Clemson's got going with Joe Girard and Jack Clark. Just another note there. Carter, any final thoughts as we wrap up this show?
Just that I think it's going to be interesting to see how the transfer portal continues to go. You will see where Thomasson commits. If Pitt lands him, what is the message sent for the team this year? If they don't land him, where do they go from there? Because, you know, we've seen them, you know, I was covering them when the Efton Reed thing broke out years ago, when it was like reported that, oh, he's picking Pitt. No, he's not picking Pitt. Oh, yeah, he is. He's not. And then he went to Florida, and now he's back in the ACC in Wake Forest. You know, but there's a lot of times that we hear a lot of rumors about things, but I do wonder, you know, if we're hearing, you know, we're seeing he's putting them in Pitt in his top 5. Can Pitt win some more of these battles? And if they win this one, what does that do for the roster here for Jeff Capel? Just intriguing to see how that continues to play out as Pitt try to finalize their roster before the summer.
He really seems to fit the mold of the guys that they've gone after. You know, I mean, they've only hosted 2 official visits, and both of them said yes. So it seems like, once again, they're being very picky. Or not once again. It seems like this year they're being very picky compared to last year. And they're going after mid-major guys with experience. So not a bad formula to go with based on what they're returning, in my opinion. But that's all we got for this week's mailbag. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and shoot those questions over to Carter or myself via Twitter or email. Until then, we'll see you next week here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.